Hello, everyone. I am Frances Jo Hamilton, the Director of Revitalization with Heritage Ohio, and I would like to welcome everyone to today's online discussion. Webinars and online discussion sessions are brought to you as a membership and benefit of Heritage Ohio. Heritage Ohio's mission is to help people save the places that matter, build community, and live better. Today, we will have an interactive discussion with local bankers from Richwood Bank. We will be taking questions throughout and at the end of the presentation. Please remain muted throughout the presentation. If you have a question, please type it into the chat box at any time. The moderator will read your question and the panelists will answer. Please make sure that you are muted throughout the presentation in order to avoid background noise, and type anything that you would like into the chat box during and throughout the presentation. These sessions will be recorded and uploaded to our YouTube channel. Simply search Heritage, all of our sessions there. Our presenters today are President and CEO of Richwood Bank, Chad Hoffman, Union County Regional Vice President of Richwood Bank, Emily Davis McElroy, Chief Experience Officer, Heather Worth, Executive Vice President and Chief Operating Officer of Community Bankers Association of Ohio, Asa Bittinger, Jr., and founder and CEO of Ascend Consulting, Jacob Schroeder. Thanks so much, everyone, for being on today. And at this point, I'll turn it over to Ty.
Actually, I'm going to send it on over to Heather.
And then I'm going to parlay it right over to Chad.
Welcome, everybody. Obviously, well timed here, well thought out. But thank you very much for the opportunity. We enjoy talking with the businesses. We realize some unprecedented times here and some things going on that none of us have ever seen before. So we're trying to partner together to make this happen. But just for a little bit of background and a little bit of shameful marketing, Richwood Bank's been on a 5-year mission. And no, I know we've all heard of the 5-year mission. This one's not to explore strange new worlds and seek out new life or new civilizations. But even though with this COVID thing, I think a new civilization has kind of found us. But we have been willing to go to places that no other bank has been before to stay relevant to today's business world. Our mission is basically, if you read at the bottom of the screen there on the previous screen, was to inspire, protect, and celebrate anything that helps the communities thrive. And we believe the community banking model could do more than what necessarily we've done in the past. The last 5 years, we've created Richwood Marketing. This is an internal company that we have that helps our clients market themselves. We think if we can help our business clients market themselves, their clients bring more clients in, that just helps them, helps us at the end of the day, and the community is stronger. Richwood Payroll, we do payroll for about 160 companies. Richwood Financial, this is just for helping with 401ks, starting them up from the business side as well as the individual side in their investments. Richwood U, this is an education arm that we have that we bring in speakers. We have classes that help on specific leadership or management or maybe strategic planning skills to try to help businesses understand some of the things they want to know. The last one we started is called Richwood Coffee. 4 of our current branches right now have a coffee shop inside them where we try to bring the community in for not only a transaction, but to communicate with each other and to, again, bring people together. Obviously, in the last 2.5 months, we haven't been able to do that. We reopened Monday of this week and are now functioning again inside both the banks as well as the coffee shops. But it's obvious to us if there's no community, you certainly aren't going to need a community bank. We're driven, even if it's for our own survival, to help businesses be successful in any environment. And now that we have this vastly new environment, we believe that the community bank can be kind of the focal point of the reopening and basically their community recovery efforts. So to help explain our angle on kind of business life after COVID, as Frances said earlier, we have Emily Davis McElroy. She's a regional VP. We have Heather Wirtz, who's our Chief Experience Officer. Jacob Schroeder, who has been working with us a lot on the PPP loans. He is the genius behind, I swear they should have just consulted with Jacob when they were doing the stuff, but he's the CEO of Ascend Consulting. And then we've asked Asa Bittinger, the Executive Vice President and Chief Operating Officer with CBAO, the Community Bankers Association of Ohio, to join us and kind of possibly gives a little bit of what community bankers are doing all over the state to help their communities. It's not just ours or in our part of Ohio, but all over Ohio, I guess, move forward. So with that, I guess the next slide there is going to go into our favorite subject, and that is the PPP forgiveness. The application is available. It's out there. We don't put we're trying to go by it right now, but we also believe that the rules are fluid and that they'll change. There's a bill that's already been passed by the House that changes significant parts of it. And so I know Jacob, I think, is going to be talking about this in a little bit, in a couple of slides. But what we wanted to get across was that the banks are partnering with the businesses. This is not just all on the businesses. The banks have a share in this. We're kind of linked at the hip right now to make sure that this is successful, that we get people forgiven, that you don't have a loan that you're paying back over the next 2 or 5 years or whatever this is. We want to make sure that we helped you get the information to spend the money correctly, follow the rules, and basically get this forgiveness at the end of the day. But we can't do it for you. I mean, that's an important part that they've put out there, but we want to be a resource to get you the information and the things that you need to make that happen. So with that, I can now go to the next slide there. And Jacob, I don't know if you're willing to discuss some of the things that are out there right now that are possible to change.
Yeah, so first I'll set the stage here. We had the bill originally, which had some forgiveness language in it, but not a lot of guidance. So a lot of what you had heard up until right before Memorial Day was assumptions of what forgiveness was going to look like. So there's a lot of media talk about what forgiveness was going to look like and how it was going to be handled. So then the Friday before that, we actually got a application. So we now have an application. It's an 11-page application to go through forgiveness. And then a week later, on Friday night at 10:30, they gave us 30 pages of guidance on how to fill out the application. Last Thursday, after we finally have guidance, so going high level here, we had the House pass a bill which dramatically changes things. And the Senate, as of yesterday, is looking to make some changes to that, but they plan to hopefully pass something this week. So we are going to talk about forgiveness, but no, there probably is some changes coming in certain areas. This chart here that Richwood put together is pretty good. When we look before, we have 8 weeks to spend it. We talked a lot about this when you were applying, when you were doing other things. There was 8 weeks of spending. Then to get your full-time equivalents back up, there was a safe harbor of June 30th. And what that safe harbor said was, do you have the same number of full-time equivalents on June 30th that you did on February 15th, 2020? And if that safe harbor was the same, which means you brought everybody back, then you could get forgiveness. There was also a provision in there that said 25% of, no more than 25% of your forgiveness amount could be spent on rent, utilities, and mortgage interest. So that left, to get forgiveness, you had to spend the other 75% on payroll. And I think we have a slide in here later, just touch on it now. There is some complications in that one. The taxability standpoint, they said this was a non-taxable event, right? Well, the IRS then, aside from the Treasury, who has done all of the rest of the guidance on this, the IRS came out and said, well, we're not going to tax the income, but we're also not going to allow you to deduct your expenses, which in effect makes it taxable income. It would be treated no differently than its taxable income. And then the payback period on this was 2 years at 1% interest. So what the House passed was we take 8 weeks and change it to 24 weeks. Our safe harbor calculations still use the February 15th side for the beginning, but when you have to have them restored by, switches up to December 31st of 2020. So that's a pretty substantial change. Gives you a lot more time to rehire people, a lot more time to spend your money. Then they also gave us a gift in that only up to 40% of this can be spent on rent, utilities, and mortgage interest. So that means if you didn't hire people back until a lot later in the year, you could still count all of your expenses and get a lot more of that calculated. This also solves some of the problems that we talked about with the payroll and expenses where for owners, it may be impossible to get to 75%. It is impossible to get to 75% if you're just an owner. So it kind of solves that problem. There's proposals out there from Congress to go back to the IRS and say, hey, these expenses are deductible the forgiveness is not taxable, and kind of restore what a lot of us believe that intent of the bill was. Then they're also changing the payback period to 5 years versus 1 year. This is great for small businesses, not so great for the banks, right? Because now they have 5 years at 1% and a lot longer carrying period. But it seems pretty strong, these proposed items coming out there, and would be a lot more flexible for businesses to be able to spend that money and truly get it forgiven. Because right now with the 8-week time frame, a lot of businesses weren't open yet. So they're losing their 8 weeks. They're not going to get it all. They're not going to be able to spend that too extensively on this. And therefore, there's going to be a chunk of money not forgiven. So with the 24 weeks, we feel like most of them should be able to get that forgiven, and is a lot more attractive from that standpoint. Chad, I don't know how deep you want me to go, but that was kind of the overview from that slide.
No, I appreciate it. I think just the big one is right now, Jacob, that nothing can move forward yet. I mean, there's
Correct.
a lot of things that are still up in the air. The biggest thing for me is what banks and even yourself are able to do for clients to help them get to this forgiveness side, because
Right.
we're critical for some people and their knowledge base on how to answer some of these questions.
So what we're doing from that standpoint is we are actively tracking where we're at in our spend, so we know what we have left to do. And then we are creating plans and saying, how do we get to 100% forgiveness? What can we do to get to 100% forgiveness? How do we need to bring employees back? When do they need to be brought back? Should we be paying them hazard pay? Should we not be paying them hazard pay? And obviously there's some in here where as business owners, you have to take some calculated risk, right? It's like, do I try to make sure everything's spent within 8 weeks, knowing that we may have 24 weeks, and give employees really large bonuses, because I'm putting this in quotation marks because nothing's free, but free money, right? Or do we plan on using the full 24 weeks and paying it out over a normal pay schedule? And yes, incentivizing our employees for being great workers during this time, as you would in any good cultured company, you would incentivize those employees. So not going excessive there. So you do need to weigh out that risk and say, what is that difference? What should that be? Do we want to take that risk on hopefully it gets extended? A 471 to 1 vote in the House is pretty overwhelming.
Yes.
But I know the Senate was hoping to pass this week, and then last night they came out and said, well, they have senators opposed to this and they are going to have to make some tweaks to it. So what that means, we're unsure of. But you really need to be tracking it. You need to be diving in, understanding the calculation, and know where you're at from a forgiveness standpoint, because otherwise you can't make those right choices, right? You don't know where you're at, which means you have a ship without anybody at the helm, and it's going to wander off course, which means you're probably not going to get forgiveness unless you're really paying attention to that.
No, thank you. Our biggest goal is to keep the information in front of the businesses. We've got a weekly newsletter we send out called The Path to Forgiveness. And it's basically to put more information in front of the borrowers so they understand, what to expect, even though it's fluid and changing as we go.
And that's the biggest thing here is you have to pay attention. This is not something where if you got your loan, you can just ignore it until it's time for forgiveness, because it's changing too fast, right? It's changing on a weekly basis. What it looks like is changing. So you really need to stay on top of it. Talk to your bank, make sure you're understanding where they're at. Talk to your advisors, really work with them to make sure you understand what the game plan needs to be for you.
Jacob, we have a question about this. If we don't need 24 weeks to spend the full amount, can we submit our PPP forgiveness application sooner?
So as of right now, the 24 weeks has not passed. So I'm going to say we don't have sure answers on that yet. But even when you look at the 8 weeks, if you didn't need the safe harbor calculations of the June 30th, theoretically you could start submitting your application as soon as your 8 weeks was up. So in that case, I think if your spending was full and you had spent everything, this is probably more of a bank question of they're certifying those payroll records, and if the spend's complete and the SBA has opened up that process for them to actually submit that to the SBA, then I think you should be able to do that part of it. But no, if the application changes, because if it goes to 24 weeks, the application is going to need a substantial overhaul, which means there will be a delay from the SBA side of opening that up.
No, I completely agree, Jacob. And our intentions were, yes, once the money is spent and people kind of had hit that 8-week period, we were going to allow them to start, applying. Our worst case scenario is we had over 700, loans that we did, and all of them apply on the same day for forgiveness. That would not be fun. So, we're hoping we can get these started earlier than later, going anywhere from 8 to whatever number of months, this goes to. But once the money is spent, and if it's spent on the qualifying expenses, our encouragement was to, let's go ahead and get your application in the works. But we're not going to do any until obviously we have more guidance and we understand exactly what that final application is going to look like.
Yeah, so if your 8 weeks was up this week, I would not recommend submitting for forgiveness right now. Like, I'm going to just put that out there. I would not recommend it. There's way too much in flux right now, and that is changing. So I would hold off on that until we have some better guidance and some concrete guidance for sure.
Yes, understood. Thank you. And with that, I also want to, I know one of the things that's happening, just like you were talking about with Congress making some of these changes, I want to ask Asa if he doesn't mind with Community Bankers Association of Ohio to kind of mention our grassroots efforts. I mean, community banks all over the state have been, lobbying to help the businesses, and not only from the original application side, but from this forgiveness side, to make things as easy as possible. And like you said, Jacob, kind of get back to what the spirit of the act was all about. And Asa, do you mind mentioning that?
Yeah, absolutely. Thanks, Chad. When this whole COVID-19 process started, very quickly, our legislators recognized the significant impact that this was going to have against small business owners, and they had no hand in the matter, but they were going to face a very direct and immediate impact. And so very quickly, the House was able to pass PPP, and within less than 2 weeks, we were able to start funding right there in the middle to the end of March. And since that time, the community banks have done an exceptional job pivoting and working with their small business owners to get the money into the hands of the small business owners to help their employees. So with that, they've done an exceptional job. Here in Ohio, we've processed over 128,316 PPP requests and distributed over 18.3 billion back to local markets. And the nice thing about working in the community banking sector is that that's being distributed through all 88 counties across Ohio. So there isn't a consolidation or concentration, if you will, in terms of where those funds have been distributed. Also, the average loan is about $118,000, so rather nominal to what we may see on the news with a lot of the requests being 2 million and greater. And of all the requests that have been processed, 79% of all PPP requests have been $100,000 or less. So they really have gone to the small business owners in local communities everywhere. And so our community banks have done an exceptional job. Already mentioned the guidance that was coming out from the SBA. While it was well intentioned, it certainly was lacking a significant amount of clarity. Our community bankers have been able to voice their concerns on multiple occasions at this point to make sure that the community banking industry as a whole has a fair and access playing field to have not only access to the system, because early on, many of the community banks were not even able to log into the PPP portal to submit applications for many, many days, in some cases, 7 to 10 days to get things started. But also they were oftentimes closed out. So through the community bankers sharing their voice and their advocacy, we were able to get specific times where on a Wednesday evening, for example, for about 8 hours, it was access to the PPP portal was limited to community bankers only, which was exceptional. Even when they did that, it would have been nice if we could have had a little bit notice so we could have staffed accordingly and had bankers on call or present, since many of them had already been working midnight and beyond. But the community banks in Ohio have done an exceptional job dispersing the proceeds, and we are now moving into later phases of the forgiveness and processing those. And I know the SBA has a call tomorrow at 2 p.m. to walk Ohio bankers through the 1502 process. So hopefully we'll learn a little bit more information.
Well, thank you. I appreciate the efforts of again, community bankers all over the state to make this happen. But now for the businesses that are out there, that was a little bit of the technical section. I want to get to, how do businesses, that are getting started right now, what are some things that maybe that they can look at to reopen and kind of re-engage with their communities to drive as much volume as they can in a time that it's still weird. We've been open for a couple of days, and I know this slides was something that Jacob talked about, so we'll skip forward on that one. But how do we re-engage with the customers that we haven't necessarily seen for a few weeks? So Heather, I think you're taking these, if I'm not mistaken. Please.
Yes. Thanks, Chad. The one thing that we've noticed as well is because we work with so many businesses in the marketing side of this as they're planning on reopening is both as a business owner and a customer myself, it seems that you either have some attitude or some gratitude with new customers. Patience is very thin, and I know service has been challenged a lot, but if we could go back, the thing to look at is the 5 things that customers want. And these are tried and true. Gallup polls since the 60s have had the same answers every time, regardless of how we are being communicated to, whether it had been television to where now it's all digital, the same needs of that customer still exist today. So the 5th most important thing they want is price. And I know a lot of people think that price is the most important, but it actually is not. They would rather have, selection and service are much more important. But the most important thing is the actual confidence. And people want to know that they are confident in what they're buying and what they're getting and what they're doing. So as you're reopening, those are some of the things I think to remind yourself is what can I do to make my customers confident that I am providing a safe selection for them to choose from and that I am making the service impeccable so that the other part of price is not as important. So with that, the first thing is to literally walk through your processes as if you were your customer. Now that is for your website, that is for your stores, anywhere that a customer can get in contact with you and engage with you. Flip the lens and walk through. So even with the banks, as we were planning these lobbies, we literally walked in the front doors and navigated through the entire bank to decide how am I going to do this so that I don't create a bottleneck, I do not create any type of awkwardness. Sometimes you might notice when you're going in and out of stores, I know that's why a lot of the bigger chains had entrance only and exit only, is because when you are getting put into a position where you're uncomfortably facing one another, it can actually make the experience not as positive. So once you're going through everything, figure out where those disruptions are, what kind of a capacity you're going to be able to have. The next thing is that you should communicate to your customers what it's going to look like for them. One of the examples I have is we actually have a hair salon here in Marysville. She sent out a detailed email that also was on her website, that was also on her store frontage, that went through step by step what to do after you've made your appointment, from parking, where you park, to how you come in, to how they're going to greet you, and how they're going to even offer you products and even payment. She went through all of the expectations so that when they came in, they were clearly understanding what was going to happen. Another example is we had 2 separate dentist offices. One of those dentist offices did the same thing. They called, confirmed your appointment, went through the process, how they were going to bring you in, if you were a parent, what to expect if you were bringing in a minor child, and everything was very clear. There was another dentist office that your appointment came and they did not pre-call you or talk with you, but as soon as you walked in, you were scolded because you weren't following the correct distancing guidelines or the mask expectations. So again, communication right now is so key. And we are finding that the attention span of actually consuming is a lot higher, as you know, because there are definitely a lot of people out there that are just reading. And the signage, the other thing is for those that aren't reading or picking up everything that you're putting out there, making sure that they have some type of guidance when they get there. When I talk about touch points, a touch point is any way a customer can engage with you. Again, I know I've mentioned emails, store frontage, and even online social presence. Look at every single way they can engage with you. Another thing we've noticed is a lot of businesses have changed up their hours, whether it be to offer, senior shopping moments, or because of their service issues, they've shortened hours. make sure your Google listings, your Facebook, all of these different touch points that you have are accurately reflecting what your world looks like now. Make sure that your website homepage has everything clearly spelled out as well, because again, we don't know from a patient standpoint who is going to be able to tolerate versus who is not, and I would really hate that during this reopening period some people are turned off. And the last thing is, talk to other business owners. We've had a lot of great forums like we are right now where we can compare notes, talk about things we've learned, even the simplest things. After we reopened, we realized having wrapped straws versus unwrapped straws. I know that sounds very small, but it made a big difference in how we were able to service that customer without touching something. So every piece of detail and interaction you have is very important. And then finally, how can you be present in your community right now? There are so many businesses that have kind of played the hand they were dealt and tried to come up with new ways to interact and engage so that they continually have that type of loyalty or retention with customers and have actually gained more in return. One example was we have a wedding designer. Obviously, she was not making invitations right now. Her entire season was actually kaput because her other side was photography. She began teaching online calligraphy classes for free and was helping all of her brides-to-be do other planning that they could do now so that when they are able to open up or have their date, they were ready to go. So different ways you can get involved. We've had restaurants that have taken food to shelters. We have servicing, sending different catered meals to our police officers. However you can be a part of it and be our group and our network is really important right now, because those are the things people will remember when we hopefully get back to a new world of almost what we used to know as normal. So if we have any questions. Back to that confidence, what is something in your life that you could benefit from being more confident in? The one thing we've learned with working with all of our businesses there are different pain points that all of you may be dealing with at different times. And if you could hit there you go. These are the most common that we have found time and time again. A lot of our community businesses, you may need more time, or maybe it's the cash flow, or maybe it's finding new team members right now. I know we've also had a big shakeup in the service industry, especially with hiring. So finding those pain points and deciding where you have the best flexibility to get more confidence in that is something that we're wanting to help you do. We can go to the next one. Thank you. I just wanted to also let you all know that as we've been developing things, this was actually before any of this pandemic happened, we have been building a system for partner rewards. We, as you saw, have over 2,700 businesses that are partnered with us, and we want to help promote them. And we want to help everyone know that they are a part of the bank, and we want to encourage our customers to shop there first, because as a community, and we can support one another, we love it when our customers help each other. So we will be launching this hopefully by third quarter. And what it will do is it will reward all of our customers anytime they shop with our business customers. They will be able to earn cash back for choosing their community partners. So with that, I will put it back to any questions, anything that we can help. I mean, you've got a panel of experts here for you. So any of you business owners, any questions?
Heather,
we're ready to answer.
Yeah, I did want to ask, I know Emily's on the phone as well, and she's been dealing with a lot of the relationships as these PPP forgivenesses, or actually the applications were going out. We were helping both customers and non-customers alike. But Emily, where are you seeing the needs today for clients that we're dealing with in those relationships and things that you're being asked?
So as they've talked about lengthening, we are seeing an influx, as well as like Jacob said, once the actual preliminary application came out, we started to see a bigger influx come in of applications. A lot of those are, again, your small business owners, your main streets. They're finally seeing that, maybe this does fit the bill for us. This fits what we need. And a lot of them are using as assistance to do so. I would say we're seeing a lot come in the 50,000 and under range right now. Some are sole prop, some have payrolls, as well as claiming their Schedule C. So we're seeing a lot of it on the small business side. And to us, we prefer to call it community business without putting a size restriction on it. So we're seeing a lot of that come in, and there's just a lot of needs still in the market.
Yeah, I think, so, you know, I would encourage, if you haven't done that, or if you know people that haven't, I would encourage them to deal with their community bank, you know, the bank that they deal with, and, you know, talk about it. Because while it might not have been attractive before, some of the changes that are being made, it may become more attractive now. And I know it's still open until June 30th, I believe is the date. I have to see. Yeah. I think that's correct. And there's still money in it. It was kind of funny because the first batch went so quickly. We were afraid that second batch was only going to last a few days. And here we are several weeks later, and there's still money there. So, you know, that average loan amount went down. This isn't just for big companies. You know, they're trying to help out anybody that's trying to get restarted right now. So I would encourage you to, you know, discuss it with somebody. I mean, you know, if you don't deal with Richwood, you know, whatever your community bank is, or your partner, you know, like Jacob, someone like that can help you kind of navigate, is this a good thing for us now? Maybe it wasn't 2 months ago, but today it's a different looking item than it was then as well. So I would encourage you to review it. If you haven't taken advantage of that, or you know somebody that hasn't, I would encourage that a lot.
I also agree with Jacob in the fact of work backwards. Take the application, figure out what that forgiveness would look like for you, and work yourself backwards as far as monthly bills, payroll, things of that nature. I think that will really help you as far as understanding how it applies to your business and what percentage of forgiveness you're looking at.
Perfect. Well, thank you.
Just a quick question, that this is for independent contractors like hairdressers who rent a booth and things like that. That's one of the things, people who haven't been applying.
Absolutely. Jacob, you want to take that one? I know you, again.
Yeah, so obviously in this, it does qualify for sole proprietors, independent contractors. So the goal in this was, if you have employees, the employees apply with the owner. So it's one package deal. If you're only paying subcontractors, then the subcontractors apply on their own. So if you are a subcontractor getting paid via 1099, you should be applying for this on its own. The max amount is still based upon $100,000 annual salary, right? Is the max. But basically, you're going to take your Schedule C from 2019, divide it by 12 times 2.5, and that is going to give you your loan amount. So if you made $100,000, it's $20,833, right? Then when you come to forgiveness, what they're going to forgive for you is based upon your 2019 income as well, because they know you don't have income during this time, right? So they're looking at that and saying, let's look at what 2019 was. We're going to divide that by 52 and multiply it by 8. So it's going to be 8 weeks worth of that time. So fair warning on this from an independent contractor point of view, you're never going to be able to get to 100% forgiveness. And there was a slide in there, we kind of touched on that, because when you do that math, you end up 8 weeks of 52 into 2.5 months worth, ends up at 73.8%, not 75%, right? So you have 1.2% that you did not get. And since other expenses can only be a max of 25% of your forgiveness amount, you're going to end up with a portion that is not forgivable. But, you know, look at your loan size is going to be, you know, 1.5% or so is going to be where you're at there, just from a safe ballpark. Just know that going in. Don't be like, oh, if you were 100,000, oh, I got $20,000. I'm getting 20,000 forgiven. No, you will owe a little bit back no matter what. And not all of that's based on payroll. You do still have to look at that rent and utility expense. So hairdresser's a perfect example because they do have rent there as well.
And again, that's with today's rules, obviously. I mean, we're hoping they'll take a look at that and say, hey, we messed up the math there. That's not going to work out very well. It's impossible to get full forgiveness. I don't think that was, as Jacob mentioned earlier, the intention of the rule to begin with, but that's where it sits today. So again, we're asking people not to panic on that yet, but that is, again, it's exactly what he said. That's where we sit today, but thank you. Joyce, was there any other questions?
Yes, there is. There's another question about 501c6. The question is there any progress as to if and when a 501c6 is eligible to apply?
I have not heard anything further on that one. I think that one kind of, from what I had gathered, that one was sort of dead on arrival. Jacob, have you heard any more progress on that one?
I have not heard any more progress on the 501 C6s.
Yeah, and I hate that because, again, that involves some great organizations, but I believe that's, correct me if I'm wrong, that's the lobbyist side of it. The 501c6s, I think.
That's the C6 is generally like Chamber of Commerce and
which is a
Convention and
lobby.
Visitors Bureau.
Right, which is a lobby group technically. I mean, you're representing a group of people, so that's where lobbyists fall into. And I think that part of it, they get nervous about supporting specific entities. You know, sometimes it can become political. And that was the reason that I'd heard it, was the 501c6s. There are some organizations in there I think that would surprise you. Yes, chambers of commerce, you would think, oh, no problem. But they technically represent a lobbying group, obviously, in state as well as county and national levels. There's some others that, you know, you might be surprised would fall into that category. So I don't think that one's going to fly from what I understand. But again, every day is a new adventure on this program.
We have another question. How are you handling building owners who might have retail or residential spaces that may not be able to collect rent right now? Is there a plan for property owners?
That's a great question, and we know that that's a group that has been punished through this. We're hoping that maybe some of the PPP loans that were allowed to go towards rent, that some of that rent was going towards those owners. But at this time, I haven't seen anything yet on help specifically for that group. It happens a lot of them where you can't kick somebody out if they're not paying rent payment. You know, mortgages, you can't foreclose on a mortgage during this period if they're not paying. So, you know, the actual property owners, they're the ones that are kind of taking it on the chin right now. I don't know for how long this part will last. I am not aware, Jacob or Asa, I'll ask either one of you, are you aware of anything that's going to help what I would call that property owner, a program for that?
No, I mean, originally there was economic injury disaster loans that came out,
Right.
and those lost rents did qualify for that. So if you had a projected lost rent due to the disaster, you could apply for an EIDL loan. But that funding has been exhausted. They do have some funding open up for agriculture and companies, but not for regular rental owners or business owners in that case. So from the EIDL, that's closed now. Whether they add more funds to that, I've not heard of anything. And I've not heard of anything else coming. I've heard a few things thrown around, but nothing actively being worked on in legislation personally.
The other piece with this is, for instance, SBA loans. They have deferred all payments. Work with your local banks. We have done a lot of payment deferrals. So while it doesn't make up for the interest that's accruing or the actual missed payments, they're not being reported. They're not going against your credit score. They're not going against your integrity with the bank. So that's another big thing about making sure you have a good relationship with your lenders. Because that is something that is being issued across the board, whether it's home loans, business loans, just property loans in general. There are a lot of deferments happening. So that does help to make up for some of that.
Right, doesn't necessarily give the money back, but it helps certainly cash flow today. So thank you, Emily. Joyce, is there anything else?
Yes. What is the business environment for new businesses or new capital loans for businesses post-COVID?
I get, if you mean, you know, has credit kind of contracted? Asa, you probably be a great one to answer on this, what you're hearing from the community banks and kind of the credit availability.
Yeah, certainly everyone is paying very close attention, especially to the commercial real estate market and to the question already presented about rents to commercial real estate landlords or owners. We have not yet seen any type of contraction or tightening of credit at this point. Everyone is kind of in a wait and see mode because they don't want to overreact. But to the one question earlier, I would say if you have an opportunity, bank with a community bank. I'm biased in my response there, but if you're banking with a community bank, they're your neighbor and you have a chance to actually go in and talk to the president and the decision maker there locally in your own market without the decision being made out of state elsewhere. But right now, we have not seen any contraction or tightening of credit.
I would agree. I mean, we've had a great quarter. I mean, when it comes to loans, we continue to make them. We actually were really close to being on budget, what we thought the year was going to be before COVID even happened for our second quarter. So we're still writing the loans that there's still very viable borrowers out there that are moving forward. So thank you. Joyce, anything else?
Yes.
Oh, I was saying, Oh, I was just going to add on to that, that the one thing that we've been aware of and watching closely in the future of this is what we have learned is through this pandemic, a lot of people that were present within office spaces have now successfully begun working from home. So it's more of a, also what will retail space look like in the future and what types of investments will people have in commercial real estate. So that's the other thing we're trying to keep a pulse on to see what happens with values moving forward.
Okay, the next question was, what are the steps I should take with my bank if I am behind or know that I will be behind on a loan payment?
The biggest one that I would start off with is talk to them before you get behind. That's huge. The communication is always key. And this isn't just during COVID. I would encourage that at any point in time. I mean, this would have been 2 years ago. If you were going to be late on a payment, if you talk, especially, again, A's and I are a little bit skewed on this one, but if you're talking to the community banker, there's all kinds of things that they can do to help work with you. But if you wait until you're 90 days past due and then decide to call your bank and say, hey, we need to do something, they're already aware of that. Okay, so that's not really getting ahead of the situation there. So I would encourage you, before you get late. I mean, yes, everybody knows there's challenges out there right now. Like Emily said, we've had full payment deferrals. We've had interest-only payments that they're making. It doesn't necessarily forgive any money that you're going to owe back, but it says it's not necessarily due today, and we're not going to punish you or report to the credit bureau that, hey, you didn't make your April payment because your business was closed. So we push that out, and you just make payments later as opposed to right now. So I hope that answers the question. But my encouragement is, don't just do this during COVID. Be talking to your banker at all times with regards to where you are with your payments. If you're having some kind of a struggle, communicate. If they're not working with you in some way, I would encourage you to change banks. Sorry.
Another question, what can a small business do to stand out at this time to shine above the rest? Are there resources to help with creativity?
Oh, there you go. I love that. Heather, I'm going to leave that one to you.
And unmute there. Okay. Yes, thank you for that question. Of course, we do have Richwood Marketing. They're offering any support and help to any local businesses. They've already been working with several, so they've got lots of ideas and solutions that they've already seen work and have great results from. They always offer free consultation. The other is you can also research what other businesses like you are doing in other states as well. It's amazing what kind of inspiration is out there, and you can gain from there and share. And I also recommend that you talk to like businesses too. It's amazing, again, what you can do as a group of individuals. But like I said, the things that are shining are impeccable service, not putting them in any awkward situations, and making sure that you're still relevant in what they are needing today.
Joyce, we have some books that we love, and we would be glad to list those that we think kind of drive people to think about their models in a different way. To be honest with you, we study a lot of industries that aren't even banking. One of our favorite ones to study is Disney. And Disney doesn't have a whole lot to do with banking, but we love to study what they do from a customer experience perspective and try to insert some of those ideas or things into our industry. So just because it's not something maybe that your industry normally does, that doesn't mean that it's illegal to do it yourself. The more unique or the almost crazier to a certain degree, maybe that will bring attention to your business. And we'd love to help you on that if you're in our area. If not, there are other resources, and we'd be glad to give you kind of a few books that we find very interesting on kind of helping your mind move through some of those ideas. Anything else?
We don't have another question, and maybe ought to just start rattling off some of those books while we wait for another question.
Understood. I'm going to grab one out of a cupboard right over here, but Heather, if you want to mention any.
Well, the first we do is E-Myth Revisited, and that talks about the importance of working in your business versus on your business. Many people are experts in what they do, and they want to open a business, whether it be through your skills of cooking or possibly building something, but then you get so caught up in that you don't realize that you're also HR, you're also marketing, you're also your accountant, and you kind of get caught up in the day-to-day, and then you aren't able to work on it. So that's a great book to start with. There's another one, it's called Make It Stick. That's the Heath brothers. That one explains how you can combine more senses and emotions. So like, for instance, If you see it, you hear it, you feel it, or you're connecting it some way to emotion, you're going to have more of a memorable experience that way. So that's a great book to get you inspired as well.
She mentioned it, yeah, Michael Gerber is the E-Myth Revisited. I hope you can read that, that's out there. That's the one she's mentioning on that. She mentioned Chip and Dan Heath. They wrote another one that I absolutely love called The Power of Moments. This is a fantastic book with regards to how to give great customer service and provide just a few just really great wow moments that kinds of takes away. They mentioned one of the stories is about Disney. And when you go to Disney, there's a lot of things that are kind of congested about Disney. Getting there in the morning, you're stuck in traffic. You got to go through the turnstiles. You got to go through security. But why is it considered the happiest place on earth? Because about the time you see the castle or you get a picture taken with Cinderella, you forget about all that other stuff. And so if you and your business can offer a couple of those just really wow moments, that moment with Cinderella, granted, we don't have Cinderella in our lobbies, but if you can do something that really blows the customer away, they kind of forget about the other clunky stuff that may have had to happen during their experience. Another one that I really love is from John DeJulius, is called Secret Service. It has a lot of examples from different industries and things that they do to make the customer experience a great one. John DeJulius, I think, is the owner of John Roberts Spa, I believe is where he comes from on that one. And then I have a favorite writer that I think that every business should read. There's a book called Start With Why, kind of says, what are we here to do? As a business, what's our goal? What are we going to provide? Why do we exist? Everybody knows what you do. You even know how you do it. But the question is, why do you exist as a company and what are you trying to accomplish? This is a great book for that. He came up with one at the October of last year that was called The Infinite Game. And I love this book as well when it comes to, playing a little bit different game than maybe what your competition is playing. So those are my personal faves when it comes to kind of how the business moves and some just personal faves. So I encourage you to read them.
That's great. Thank you.
Another thing too is yeah, and while some of you have been closed as we were, we have staff that we really didn't have a purpose for because they were in that big old non-essential, grouping, which kind of hurts your feelings. It's like, no, everyone is essential here. So what can we do? And the outpouring of give me something, let me help really inspired us because we looked at our why. Like, why are we here? And we knew it was inspire, protect, celebrate community. So what can we do with these people at home who want to continually help the bank? And we devised a calling list of every senior citizen customer we had. And we divvied them up amongst all of the tellers that were at home. And they just began calling them. And there was no real agenda other than to say, hey, how's it going? Are you alone? Or do you need anything? Do you have family? What's your support system like? And those calls made such a difference. I mean, I'm getting the goosebumps here. We ended up placing over 6,000 calls. And it made everyone at home feel very important. And they continue to follow up with them. Some of them sent them packages. Some of them made them cookies and mailed them. Anything they could do to kind of help fill that void and give them a wow moment. So again, everyone wants to help.
We have another question about the employee culture. What can leadership do to keep a positive culture when things seem to keep changing?
That's a very fair question, and we focus on it a lot. I actually have a position that's called the Chief Culture Officer, and their job is to put that. There's another great book out there that's called I think it's The Rules of Employees Engagement. It's written by Patrick Lencioni. It's the 3 rules of employee engagement, and one of them is it's anonymity is one of the rules to make sure that somebody doesn't feel anonymous. Make sure you know who they are. You're encouraging them. You know their family. I mean, if you're the manager, you should know whether they're married, whether they have kids. What their interests are. That just keeps somebody from feeling like they're anonymous. The second thing was irrelevance. And if they believe that their job isn't important, just like Heather just said, we could have had a group that didn't feel very important because we were able to send them home and the bank was still operating. So what can we have them do that keeps them relevant in the business? So if they don't know how their job is relevant during this, I think that's huge to explain why their position is important. It's just important as a human being to feel like you're being used. And when I say used, utilized. Let me not just say used, utilized. That's a bad sense of words there. And the last one is a word that he kind of created called immeasurement. And a measurement means that I don't have any idea really where I'm performing. I don't know if I'm in the top 10% of performers or if I'm in the bottom 10% of performers. Let people know, give them some kind of measurements to drive off of that they're trying to achieve. Those are three things that we focus on a lot to try to just keep people engaged in the organization. And it's really easy to get down. We do what we call quarterly celebrations, where we bring all of our teams together. I mean, we've got 166 employees. We bring them all together, and needless to say, we canceled it in April because we weren't allowed to bring everybody together. But we do that to kind of celebrate successes. We celebrate some awards that people get voted for. Just show appreciation. That's the big one, and make sure as the leader that you're the positive. If you're negative about the situation, then you're going to have a lot of negativity probably through your organization. So I do believe that starts at the top as well. And I don't know if anybody else on the line here has anything to add to that.
Chad, I was just going to chime in real quick and say, Patrick Lencioni also launched a podcast last year, and he does a weekly podcast on that. And if you're interested in your company's culture and how to make it good, I highly recommend that listen. And it's really relevant. So, because during this time, they pivoted to remote work, and they've talked about how they did remote work. They're talking about coming back in the office and the things you want to keep and the things you might not. Returning to the old normal isn't going to happen. And what should you be looking to keep? What should you not be looking to keep? So I really recommend that if you're worried about your culture, jump on, listen to his podcasts.
Can you type his name in the chat box? It was kind of an unusual name, wasn't it?
Yeah, Patrick, it's Lencioni, and let me see, Lencioni, I believe is how it's spelled. So took me a minute there, but yeah, Patrick Lencioni. He's got several books, but that are out there, and I would encourage you to read all of them. I love him as a writer, but he's also a great speaker, and the podcast I'm sure is incredible. So thank you, Jacob. Anything else, Joyce? We're okay?
Yeah, that seems to be about it. Francis, Joe, do you want to close out?
Sure. Thanks so much, everyone. I really appreciate all of our friends at Richwood Bank pulling this together. We've spent a lot of time chatting about these trying times, and I really appreciate all the prep work that goes into putting together a session like this. If anyone has any questions for us following this session, or if you'd like to be connected directly to a contact at Richwood Bank, I'd be happy to do that. My email address is on our website, which is heritageohio.org. You can reach us there. Also, once again, this session will be uploaded to our YouTube channel probably within the next day. So you can find that by searching Heritage Ohio on your YouTube channel, and you can view our past sessions there. So thanks so much to our panelists for being here today. I just appreciate your time and patience, especially with the current technology challenges that we're all in. So thanks so much for your time today, and thanks for joining us.
Thanks, Anxious. Take care.
Thank you.
Bye, everyone.